The showdown that the whole world saw between Donald Trump and Zelensky in the White House a few days ago is something totally unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. The only reference to something similar that I know of is the treatment that Adolf Hitler gave to the leader of Austria just before the occupation of Austria by Germany, or to the Czech Republic before the incorporation of the Sudetenland into Germany back in the 1930s. But even those episodes involving Hitler were confined to the backstage. They were not public. This was a public mistreatment of a visitor, of a leader of another country. I'm not saying that Zelensky is not in some ways responsible for this situation and for these sorts of things. It's a disaster for Zelensky. It's a disaster for Europe as a whole. And that's the point I wanted to briefly explain today. And it's also a disaster for Donald Trump himself and for the United States. Because this brutality, this treatment of Zelensky, for all the world to see, teaches a few lessons that are even good for many countries like Brazil, but that are, I think, damaging to the standing of the United States. First of all, it shows quite clearly that it doesn't pay to be a satellite of the United States. Zelensky's Ukraine has been such a satellite in the last 10 to 15 years at least, or let's say 10 years, since 2014. It doesn't pay to be a satellite of the United States. But there's something even more serious in what happened. It is the fact that it projects the notion that it is also dangerous to be a friend of the United States. I wouldn't say that Europe was a satellite. It might have become close to that, but it's an ally, an important ally of the United States. And what are the Europeans and others concluding? That Kissinger may have been right when he said back in the 1960s in a private conversation that if the United States continued to behave like that towards its friends and allies, the world might conclude that yes, it's dangerous to be an enemy of the United States, but it is perhaps fatal, Kissinger said, to be a friend of the United States. That's the sort of thing that Trump is projecting. He doesn't like hypocrisy. He displays the power of the empire openly, with no disguises, very different from UK imperialism in the past. Hypocrisy was an essential ingredient of that empire, and so much so that it can be said for the English, hypocrisy was a second nature. I also recall Ted Roosevelt, a very strong and aggressive imperialistic president in the beginning of the 20th century, who used to say famously that you should speak softly and carry a big stick. Now what does Donald Trump do? He speaks loudly and carries a dubious stick. Why do I say dubious? Because the power of the United States in the international scene is not the same as it was 10 or 15 years ago. The United States has put itself into a difficult position in the recent governments of the United States. The United States has become weaker than it used to be. The long drawn-out conflict with Russia is one source of weakness. The unsuccessful attempts to contain China, the price paid by the United States, moral and political, for sustaining the Israeli genocide in Gaza and in the Palestine, the occupation of the Palestine, even the West Bank. So the United States is paying an enormous price for these failures. So Donald Trump inherited a problematic situation already. And Donald Trump is perhaps making it worse. So ironically, instead of making America great again, MAGA, he may be weakening America further, accelerating United States' relative decline. It's becoming perhaps, we don't know for sure because he's only 1 month in power and uncertainty is quite intense at this point, but it may well happen that he would further weaken the United States, accelerate its decline, make the United States more isolated than it was already.